Hello, DLD. So we go from, I guess, toxic masculinity to an example of the opposite we have right here. Lord Liam Booth Smith. And so I just want to tell people a little bit about your background, because you're the head of policy for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Anthropic. But people might not know you were also the chief of staff to Rishi Sunak, and that you were the guy. He was also Treasury Travolta, to pivot off the last panel. But you were the guy who basically kind of set the stage for Safe AI when they did a Safe AI summit in the UK under the Prime Minister. So was that when you first became interested in all this, or didn't you write the famous memo about what you had to do?
I've been interested in it for a while before that. I should say thank you to everybody as well in DLD for having me here. No, I've been interested in it a while, like pre-2019, actually, the technology. Largely because I kind of saw very early versions of things and thought it might help me to win elections. But kind of COVID and a bunch of things got in the way. And I re-engaged with the community in like 2022. And so yeah, when Rishi became Prime Minister, once we'd sorted out a few problems that had been left over by some previous administrations, we started thinking about the future and what the right thing for the country to do would be. And so yes, I had a conversation with a few people, and then I wrote a memo which began with the line, there are no votes in this, but history will judge us very unkindly if we don't do something. And so
history will judge us very unkindly if we don't do something. And so now here you are. You've been in the job, what, 9 months?
Yeah.
Still in the House of Lords, of course, so I will call you Lord Booth?
Just Liam.
Okay, so Liam it is. Tell us what attracted you to Anthropic, because people do know Claude. We just did a cover story, I think it was called The Safe AI Siblings, about Dario and Daniela Amode, the co-founders. What makes Anthropic different? What attracted you to being in that role?
So at a macro level, I kind of wanted to work in an industry with less hallucination than politics. So AI felt like a good fit for that.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's a good one. Slow ripple of laughter there. So congratulations to those who got it after a couple of seconds. No, the thing that really drove me towards, I guess the industry at large was still a kind of innate desire in myself to work in something that was going to have a profound impact on people around the world and come with a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning. And then Anthropic was really the only choice for me. A combination of, I knew some people there who I thought were great people and that I'd worked with in the past, and they were the very, very best. But also just a really consistent pattern of being just aggressively honest at all times. And that had come through in my previous job in Downing Street, and I'd seen that in the work they put out. And so when the opportunity...
The aggressive honesty is what came through in your previous job in Downing Street?
Yeah. Just, well, the things you pick up and you see, it's just the company had a track record of just saying what it thought, and being very, very transparent and very open. And if you care about the safe transition for humanity towards an AI-powered economy, I do think that sort of honesty is like pretty critical.
Look, I'm from the land of the AI bubble, of course, and before we get into the new metrics of AI, I feel like we should point out the fact, in fact, I think Henry Blodgett back there mentioned to me as well, that you've been doing extremely well as some of your competitors seem to be really struggling. I do want to get your sense as to what is it that you think Anthropic is doing, because companies are also gravitating toward what you're doing, and talk about what are you doing differently, metrics or otherwise, that is resonating not just with individuals, but also with corporations that are opening their doors?
I wouldn't talk about anyone else, any other business. So just from like an Anthropic point of view, I think there's a few things. I think like the first bit is just a relentless focus on producing like a fantastic product. So really caring about the R&D, really caring about the research, and really making sure that the things that we put out into the world that people can use are always higher quality as they possibly could be, rigorously tested, and are incredibly safe, and that we have confidence in. And I think alongside that, again, it's a continuation of just being incredibly honest and transparent about the things that we are seeing, not just in the models themselves, but in the way people use them.
So what are you seeing? Let's get to the metrics, and let's even talk about what does it mean? Safety means so many different things, right? Safe AI. Define that for us to start.
It's very difficult to define it because it exists in these different contexts, right? So I guess safety in a very broad sense is it's safety for the user, right, and the outputs it produces, so that they are safe, right? And that they conform and that they are what we expect. But safety will mean different things depending on where you are in the chain of interactions. So if you're a model producer, then safety will mean one thing. Whereas if you're a procurer of a service, it could mean something else. If you're a government, it could mean something else. So it depends on the context, basically. But I think actually we're all smart enough to kind of have a pretty intuitive understanding about what we mean when we talk about safety. It has different manifestations, but I think we can all get it.
There's this pressure right now for everybody to be racing as quick as possible to maximize AI, whether it's in jobs, et cetera, building data centers. You are in charge of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Very different scenarios there. It's not like M-Pesa and Kenya where you can leapfrog the technology. You have to build a lot of infrastructure. So how are you seeing this play out across the different regions? Because we're at a pivot point at the moment.
We are, and I guess one of the biggest things that I see, and one of the things I say to when I'm talking to governments or anyone around the world, is if you want to be a leader in AI, you have to use it. And if you want to gain benefits,
uses AI?
And if you want to gain benefits from AI, you have to use it. And so I think a critical factor, and something that we try as much as humanly possible to monitor, is adoption and usage. So today, Anthropic launched the latest version of our economic index, which is where we pull a huge trawl of Claude data on how it's being used, and then are able to analyze that and draw some conclusions ongoing about the way in which the technology is being utilized by different professions, different industries, but also across different geographies.
Any nuggets stand out for you, especially here we are in Germany? Anything that you would say that might surprise us?
I don't know if it would surprise people, but the two things that I think are most interesting are we're still in a phase now where the data shows that people are extracting an awful lot of efficiency and productivity benefit from just collaborating with the technology. So there's just a lot of collaboration. And that's just a really important signal for us that as people worry about questions of like job displacement or labor market dislocation, we're still at a phase where people are collaborating and working with the tech as opposed to like a significant escalation in automation. The next thing that I think is very interesting, though, and it's probably relevant if we're thinking about things like the India summit in February, is that what we see is a concentration, though. We see a concentration of usage in developed economies and amongst higher knowledge professions, higher skill, higher knowledge professions. And if you kind of go back to my previous comment where you get the benefit by using the technology, if we are in a world where there's a whole chunk of humanity that isn't using the technology, by default, they're not going to get the gain. And so one of the agendas that we are thinking more and more about at Anthropic, and we want to encourage more and more people to think about, is just the question of like how the global south is going to be able to have a role in the wider diffusion of AI and how it can become I guess, like the lead protagonist in its own story when it comes down to AI development.
So I want to pause there for a second, because that is not an easy thing to do for the reasons I just said and everybody else has said. You're making an incredible amount of money. I think you're valued at more than 180 billion now, the company, and yet you're still losing money. This is an expensive proposition. So how do you sort of make this something that is both safe and democratized to the global south or anywhere else that doesn't have the resources?
So in terms of safety,
30 seconds or less. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? So look, it's on the point about safety. How do you do that? It's just about us continuing to live up to our values as an organization. Like that's how we do it. We are like our own biggest critics, and as long as we're continuing to live up to the values that we set out publicly and live privately, then I'm confident that we can meet the measure in terms of safety. How does one democratize it? That's like you can't do that as a single company, right? That's about a combination of industry, of governments working together to try and expand access. And that's not something that we on our own can do, but we want to be part of it. I think that's the critical thing.
I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory environment because certainly in the States, it's game on under this administration. There's been a different philosophy in Europe, certainly around privacy, safety. You are in the House of Lords. I know it's not the House of Commons, but you've been in government in the executive branch role. I mean, what's the role of the policymakers here, and do we have the right policies to ensure safe AI growth in the way that Anthropic is doing on a perhaps self-regulated basis, put on your government hat. What should government be doing?
So there's like two stages to this, okay? The second stage is like, what should we be doing? What do we do? But there's a bit before that, which is, are we making this a priority at the center of governments? And some are doing that, rhetorically at least. But it's a question for all of us. Do we believe that governments around the world are really prioritizing it as like a central policy mission of
What
their
do you
governments?
believe?
I believe that rhetorically everyone talks a good game, but we still don't see enough in terms of actual behaviors yet. And that's because, as I know, helping to run a G7 economy from the center of government is a pretty busy job, and you are distracted by daily events, and things pull you away from focusing on the important to prioritize the urgent. And that is just a challenge that everyone faces.
I mean, it's also a kind way. I think about when you think about innovation and policy, some people flash back to that moment with Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, and they were almost treating him as, their tech guy for how to use the internet. So there's that two-track nature. But if you get back to, let's put on a bit of the crystal ball, how AI is playing out right now. You mentioned job loss. Last year in the US, fewer than 5% of job cuts were actually blamed on AI. Is this a tipping point? I mean, do you see what will happen for 2026 from where you sit?
So in terms of, I guess we talk a lot, I mean, Dario and Daniela and Anthropic more broadly have talked extensively about this question of labor market displacement. And that's because, and by the way, when we talk about that, we talk about it as it is a possible outcome in a world where things don't work the way we would hope they would, or that there aren't the choices that could be made that should be made. Right? So it's not like these things are not inevitable. It's one possible future. But we talk about it because we do believe that it requires, particularly policymakers and political elites, to be engaging with the technology, its development, its diffusion, and the consequences of that seriously. And the only way that will happen is if you raise situational awareness. And if you think about like there are stages, right, to big technology-driven revolutions, and this is super, super broad. So I'm sure loads of people are going to disagree with what I say, but forgive me on this, I've extemporized, right? But there's basically 4 things that happen when you have a big tech-driven change to kind of society and economy globally. The first thing that happens is there's a capital reordering where the investable class of money moves to something new, right? And I think we would all agree that we have seen that happen in the last 12 to 18 months, and it's happening now.
And so on that front, are we in a bubble then?
I don't know.
Okay, so
bubbles,
that's part
I don't know.
one.
Yeah, part one, right? But capital reordering, right? And then that creates stage 2, which is economic reordering, where businesses, large and small, make decisions about their services, their products, and their overhead. Right? And as a result of those choices, you then move on to stage 3, which is cultural and social reordering, where new winners emerge from those choices, but also new losers too. And then the last thing is stage 4, which is political reordering, where our political elites change their messages, their strategies, and their offerings in order to respond to that new cultural and social reality. Now, politics is always downstream of culture, almost, but not always, and it doesn't have to be. And part of what we're trying to do when we talk about things like job displacement or economic disruption is we are trying to hack that cycle, and we are trying to bring the political stage much further upstream. So policymakers and political elites are thinking about the consequences of wider diffusion in and alongside the corporate world as it's making decisions about products, services, and overheads. And we think that's a much smarter way to get ahead of potential negative consequences and mitigate some of the things that Dario's talked about.
Let me ask you, just from some of the people who've been on the front lines of technology, Joshua Bengio, Jeffrey Hinton, many people that folks in this room know, are among the most pessimistic or worried about the consequences of how AI is playing out. Then there's people, of course, who it's a whole new era of innovation. We'll see a lot of augmented humans in the loop. Where do you fit on that continuum? Give us your sense of how you're feeling about all this. Optimistic, pessimistic, middle?
I'm actually very optimistic.
Okay.
And I'm not.
Yes, you wouldn't be Anthropic if you weren't, right?
But I'm not a natural optimist, actually. I'm a natural skeptic of many things. But on this, I'm optimistic because I think there is a growing and becoming critical mass of people who are highly cognizant of both the potential of the technology to unleash amazing, amazing gains and growth and efficiency and productivity, but are also seeing safety concerns alongside that, and recognizing that they are not in conflict with one another, but they are symbiotic, is that you can do both together. You can take safety seriously while simultaneously creating great models and creating great products that really help to enhance humanity.
So I know we don't have a lot of time left. Rishi Sunak, one of the things that he talked about a lot was making, certainly the UK, that you don't have to build the technology, you just have to be first and best to use it. How do you see the conversation playing out in the UK right now, or Europe? You go to Silicon Valley. Can you give us some sense, are we moving at the pace we should be over here, since you have that global sense? I mean, I'm not to put your politician's hat on. How's the UK government doing? But just in general, I think there's often a sense of a divide between Europe and the US, and I don't know if it's overestimated on this front, since, anybody can use it.
There are always going to be differences. So I think I'm not the right person to kind of dissect those. I think what I would say is that, which is a kind of general truth, I think, the technology is developing so fast. Like, the diffusion of this tech is much faster than any previous technology that we've been able to record. Like, so much faster. And new models are coming out all of the time. New capabilities are emerging. We're learning as we're going. So that means that as you're trying to get up to speed, as like a policymaker or as a government, or even as a business, once you feel like you've kind of got a grip and you've mastered it, you're behind the curve, and you've got to start over again. And so it's this constant revolution, this constant process of learning and understanding, and it can be exhausting, is the truth. And but that's so it's almost accepting, like, it's not a race and you're not competing. Like, what you're doing is you're trying to figure it out for yourself. I think it's unhelpful to see it as a competition geopolitically.
So the title of this...
In that sense.
Oh, that's fair. So the title of this, of the new metrics, whether it's going off the research that was related today, what questions are we not asking enough in terms of how we measure success with AI? Companies, individuals, et cetera. We look at it from a monetary point of view, a job point of view. What are the new metrics that you want people to be thinking about?
There'll be a multiplicity of things that will be very, very interesting, but I think will still be a bit niche. I think the most important metric is adoption. That is like, for the next year or two, that I think is the critical thing. And I think those that use it most and fastest will be, as I said earlier, I think you get the gains by using it. I think that is a critical thing. And so if I was back in the Treasury in the United Kingdom, one of the things that I want on my...
Treasury Travolta. Why did you get that name anyway? Why were you called Treasury Travolta?
I got papped wearing a leather jacket.
Oh, leather jacket. Okay, mea culpa. Yes,
very silly. Yeah, so that will be the thing that I will be really, really focusing on. And as a policy maker and as someone in government, I'd be really thinking about how I could drive adoption and create this sort of environment which would encourage it.
And with regard to people who are in, certainly the Middle East is doing well, Saudi Arabia, are you optimistic about Africa and the global south and the ability to use this and adopt it as well, to the extent? What's Anthropic doing there?
I think, well, as I said before, there's a challenge, right? Which is, there is a separation between where the concentration of usage is right now and not. And there is a clear danger without concerted action and clear and deliberate thought that you could have a situation where developed Western economies, for want of a better word, well, not entirely, concentrate the gains and people are left behind. And so, we're thinking a lot about it. We partner with some African governments. I'm sure we'd like to do more. I know other developers and providers do partner with them as well. But I think it's not one thing a company can do on its own. This is about a concerted effort amongst the international community and a wider set of model developers and providers. We have a minute left. Give us some marching orders and give us a sense of what success looks like in your job. You're head of policy. What do you hope to achieve? Just massively raising situational awareness. So the more people are thinking very deeply about the technology, and the more people are kind of factoring it into the way they think about policy. And also, look, I think 2026 is going to be an interesting year because I think it might be the year where people at large stop being a sort of passive consumer of the tech, right? Where they read about it or they have someone talk to them about it, or they watch it on telly or something, where people are chatting about it. This might be the year where, for the first time, for a big mass of people, they'll be watching something about the tech or reading something about it, and then the technology will turn around and look at them in the eye.
And say, why are you not vibe coding?
And they will feel it. Yeah, why are you not using Claude Code?
Yeah, well, that is the
well.
question I'll take away. Please join me in thanking Liam Booth Smith. More to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.